And Andy has switched seats. So Andy is in our hot seat today. He is our very first interview. If you have been watching the Daily AI show this weekend, last week, or perhaps the entire time, you know that Andy has lived a myriad of different lives. And some of those have very interesting connections to science fiction and AI, of course. So, what we're going to do today is we're just going to start by asking a couple of questions. Oh, and we have a special thing happening at the end. Junmi, do you want to say a little bit about what? Stick around. So yeah, Junmi, what's happening at the end?
So part of our constant journey in finding better ways to engage with our audience and improve the show as overall, we are experimenting with a Q&A session for our viewers after the show with Andy Halliday. And we will be sending out a link where you all can join and we can continue the conversation after the show. So if you're interested in that, make sure to stick around and we'll have a Ask Me Anything style Q&A session with Andy after the show. And hopefully that will be super awesome.
It's the internet's version of the call in, right? It's Riverside's version of the call in,
Right.
so that you can come backstage, as it were, and join us on the stage to ask questions. So, just a couple words about the Sci-Fi AI show. We are at this fascinating intersection of science fiction rapidly becoming our everyday reality. And this is a show where we want to take a moment just to examine what that feels like, what our holy crap moments are like, what we think sci-fi is getting right, what it's getting hilariously wrong. All of those things, we'll be asking Andy those questions as well, and any guests that we have. If you have a guest that you think we should be interviewing, are you a guest you think that should be interviewed? Go ahead and pitch us. You can comment in the show notes. And so basically, what's next in our AI driven future? The future we imagined is here. What now? What's next? So, welcome, Andy. What I'd like to do to get started is, can you share a little bit about your journey? You can pick parts that you want that's sort of gotten you to this moment of the intersection of sci-fi and AI.
Sure. So I won't go all the way back to the beginning because it's too many decades. But I think the relevant portions are when I made the transition from my postgraduate work in the ski industry for 6 years, and then going to business school, and then taking a position with a New York Stock Exchange company called Edison Brothers Stores, doesn't exist anymore, which operated 3,500 stores around the country in malls. So it had multiple chains. And in 1980, so I joined that company in 1983, and I was swiftly made a division president of a small shoe company in Los Angeles that was also operating in London, and it was called Sasha London. And that chain occupied me for several years. And on occasion, when I was flying from Los Angeles to Chicago, I had the Wall Street Journal, and there was a front page side article there about a small company in Alameda, California, Sphere Incorporated, which was uh, founded by my eventual good friend Gilman Louie, who was the author of something you might be familiar with, this Falcon flight simulator. And Falcon was one of the more advanced flight simulators available for gaming. And it hit me as I was reading this that, one of the points in the little article was that they were providing situation awareness trainers for the Air Force, much lower cost than putting people into high fidelity simulators for the F-16. So they could, just do situation awareness training, just, like, oh, here I am, here's the switches, and, here's what works. And, initial training and/or scenario training for pilots at a lower cost. And I thought, this means that PC games, if you hook them together in what was then known as distributed interactive simulation, if you could hook them together, then you could have teams of players flying and fighting against another team of players in a live simulation. So this excited me, and I thought of the future of what has become multiplayer, role-playing games, and I called up Gilman Louie at his offices in Alameda, and at the time I was the president of the shoe division, and I told him who I was and how interested I was in this thing, and could I come up and meet him? And he tells the story now of some guy from a shoe company called me. Well, fast forward, Gilman and I started talking about this, and simultaneously, my company chairman, a guy named Andy Newman, was interested in developing an experiential entertainment division to supplement or to extend strategically from the delivery of merchandise in mall-based stores to the delivery of experiences in mall-based stores. And so that became the founding of what was to become the Edison Brothers Mall Entertainment division. And I was tapped to be the president of that division. The first thing that happened was in 1989, we acquired a small company in Dallas, Texas called Dave & Buster's. And that was 2 locations. And it was a big 60,000 square foot, the model of it was a 60,000 square foot entertainment center with restaurant and, interactive, skee ball games and arcade games and, bars, multiple bars and a dance floor. And you could have a corporate event there, and a really fun place to go. And many of you have probably been to a Dave & Buster's. Now it's a separate public company. And I can describe the transition from Edison Brothers stores being a vital player in the world of mall-based specialty chain store retailing to being bankrupt. And one of the things that happened was the mall entertainment division, which grew to become 250 arcades. We acquired a number of arcade, the coin-operated arcades, right? Quarters, back before consoles were available. And we had that division. And then we also had Dave & Buster's, and we also had a division called Horizon Entertainment, which was pursuing virtual reality games for Dave & Buster's and for, the arcades ultimately. So I knew as this was emerging that there was this opportunity because Gilman had the licensing agreement with Paramount Pictures, which owns Star Trek: The Next Generation. They had an agreement to do video games like Falcon, 4.0, but do it on the intellectual property of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So Gilman and I started talking about that, and that gave rise to, in March of 1992, our presenting to Paramount Licensing the idea of Starbase One. So think about Dave & Buster's, but all on the Star Trek, intellectual property, but including, importantly, VR of various sorts. So that's how I got my introduction to it. And I can spend a little bit of time sharing with you what the conceptual design was of Starbase One. And I'm sure you might be interested in those things. But let me just stop for a minute and make sure I just don't prattle on for the rest of the show. Do you have any questions about that introduction to where we got to Star Trek: The Next Generation, science fiction, and my position as the purveyor of mall-based entertainment experiences?
Junmi, do you have questions? I'm happy to
I,
have Andy
I
prattle.
yeah,
Okay.
keep going, keep
Right.
going. Yeah,
I'm gonna share.
I have questions, but I want to know more.
Okay, so here I want to, before I go into Starbase One, which is a really interesting concept, I just want to share a screen here, and let me go over here to this window, and yeah. So one of the first things that happened, Gilman and I heard about this company, W Industries in Manchester, England, that had developed a stand-up VR system that you see up here on the top left. And so me and Gilman and the chairman of Edison Brothers stores, Andy Newman, flew to England, and we went to visit with the CEO and founder of that John Waldron, and we experienced for the first time being in a virtual space. Pretty slow frame rate. It was probably 20 frames per second, but that's enough for this, pretty low resolution environment to really have the experience of being able to look up and around everywhere and to point your weapon somewhere and see your friend approach you and wave at you and be talking to you, but as an animated character in a virtual world. And that was a really big breakthrough mentally for me about what virtual reality could be. And I would say this was 1990. Okay, so we were able to bring into the United States as Horizon Entertainment as the distribution partner for W Industries in the United States. We were able to bring these systems in, put them in Dave and Buster's, and also put them into some of our arcade locations. And another concept we had called Exhilarama, which was a sort of a mini Dave and Buster's, but just with arcade and no food service or anything. But much larger floor print, even with bumper cars, a bumper car thing built into the thing, but in malls. So anyway, we had this, and then we also developed a relationship. This kind of extends to the science fiction world. We also had a relationship with this company. Oh, I'm trying to change the tab on the display here, and it's not that. Okay, over here. So if many of you may have heard of Mech Warrior or BattleTech, that's a whole intellectual property range that was developed by a person, I forget his name at the moment, but my friend Charlie Fink, who I've mentioned before on the Daily AI Show, was the chief creative officer there. And how I met him was through this relationship with BattleTech. And we put the BattleTech system, which was a distributed interactive simulation of you fighting against other mech warriors, in these BattleTech pods. And the one that I'm showing here on the second row on the left, that's the kind that we first included. Later, they advanced to a second generation of pods that you see up here on the right. And this is what the interior of the cockpit looked like. You basically had some operational displays for your mech warrior, and you could see the other mech warriors in the arena or in a larger environment charging around at you and their weapons and all that sort of thing. So we had already started to deliver this kind of thing, and we were interested in doing something on a larger, like Dave and Buster's scale. And that's how we got to the idea of Starbase One. So let me stop sharing here. And now I can kind of quickly do a show and tell about what Starbase One's whole idea was.
So as you're getting that ready, I want you to know that you are leading people down memory lane. Loved BattleTech Mech Warrior. Jude, that was Gareth. Jude is saying we are all mech warriors. So you are among your people.
Yes. At the same time, there was another distributed simulation system called Fighter Town, which was along the lines of F-16s and F-18s in that. But those were the main players in the early 90s. But I agree with you on BattleTech. I think that was one of my favorite experiences. The virtuality system had some sit-down pods as well. And one of the games, there were basically two games. The one for the stand-up one was called Dactyl Nightmare. I named that game. And the other one was called Exorex, which was also like, I named that. I came up with a name for that game. I didn't do any of the development of the game, but I named them. And so Exorex and Dactyl Nightmare were the simulation games that you could play in the virtuality system. So now, imagine at a mall near you, or a big one anyway, imagine walking up to a storefront that looked like that. And inside the doorway is a throbbing, engineering and power station for the whole, system. And then, this is kind of as you walk into the entryway, right? And by the way, it's called Blue Track because we had Project Blue as this top secret name for this undertaking that includes so many companies. This is the bridge station, right? And so there were interactive stations in front of a very large high resolution projection screen. We're talking the 90s now, but all of these were interactive touch screens, with the exception of, you see the many chairs around the surround. Those are just spectators to the bridge action. The bridge is involving itself in a game that is about interacting with various shuttles, and I'll show you. This is the design that Paramount and Andrew Probert, who was the designer of these things, came up with for a two-person shuttle that was going to be placed in the next Star Trek, the Next Generation movie, in order to establish it in the Star Trek, pantheon. But they never before had and didn't allow any weapon systems on their shuttles. And we actually got into deep conversations and got permission to actually have some defensive weapons on the shuttle so that they could do something to defend themselves against the other players in the game who would be involved with. Here, let me jump past the shuttle bay. No, I'll show you the shuttle bay. Okay, so the shuttle bay was going to look like this, and you'd go into, imagine BattleTech kind of, interactive simulators, and you're going to be interacting with people who are on an away team, who are on different, missions, who are in the stand-up simulators, right? But they could also beam aboard other stations. And that's not that interesting. There'd be a restaurant and bar, right? So you could kind of hang around in the world of the 23rd century. And somewhere in here, there's a picture of the Romulan warship, but I seem to have bypassed it. So these are just the conceptual drawings of what this approximately 50,000 square foot space would be, where once you walk in the doors, you're in the 23rd century. Now, there's a virtual environment that you enter into, and the visual presentation of the virtual environments is much more accurate. This is what Starbase looks like from the outside if you're flying a shuttle outside the Starbase. So if you get in one of the simulators and you launch from Starbase, you would then immediately see what Starbase looks like from outside, right? And then, of course, this was all to be put together by these three companies with permission from and W Industries, the developer of the stand-up simulator, Sphere, the software developer, and so forth. Now, let me just jump ahead to this part. There's a game involved. So we had developed a game philosophy. And you can see the players are all interactive. Now, there are players and non-players in the Starbase environment at any one time, and there would be sessions, right? You'd sign up to be in the 11 to 12 o'clock session, for example. And then there'd be a 12:30 to 1:30 session and so forth in the actual development of the game. Easy for a novice, yet challenging for an advanced player. The plot develops quickly and time's a factor. Don't we wish that this had been done? I'll tell you shortly why it wasn't. Okay, so in the main engine room, there's people working in the main engine room. There's only 5 stations though in the engine room, but you have to be involved if you take those positions with managing the process. These are low res images. Sorry, just a photocopy literally of some of the presentations. The bridge players are the key ones, of course. They're being washed by lots of other, people surrounding them, but they're interacting with all of the components of the operation of the bridge. You see there's 14 observers. It's a high resolution projection. Here's the Romulan warbird. Some of the players occupy the Romulan warbird, right? And they go into their own simulation space. That's the bridge of the Romulan warbird, and they're fighting against the Enterprise. Okay, I'm almost done with these things. Here's the shuttle bay again, the idea of all those multiple players. Let me see if there's anything really fascinating here beyond that, but you can see how thick this thing is. I mean, this is a full presentation, and this was given to them in early 1992. The transporter room would look like that with the stand-up stations, and you would literally be able to put the headset on and then, look around. You see the other players standing not, as visual representations in spacesuits, and then be transported onto the surface of the planet or whatever. And then, of course, there's 10 forward and all that. So in March of 92, we made that presentation. And here, dated September, is the memorandum of agreement with Paramount Pictures that basically defines the entire project and process. And so we kicked it off, and we got quite far, actually. Not really. We hadn't actually built any of the simulators, but Gilman and I had gone down to the set and taken high res photography of everything that they used in all of the sets of the interior of the Enterprise, and Sphere had used their VR development capabilities to create the digital mapping of all of those images that we did onto 3D model of the entire Enterprise. And we could actually walk around on the Enterprise in those headsets. So we were really excited about this, and this was like going to be my pièce de résistance. I was going to deliver Starbase, and STTNG fans would be able to, around the world, experience more directly this incredible universe that was created by Gene Roddenberry. Now, what happened in late 1992 was Paramount Pictures, which is a division of Paramount, Paramount, the parent, then headed up by a guy named Stanley Jaffe, acquired the King's Entertainment Company, which was the theme parks, the eventual Paramount theme parks. Well, the head of the Paramount theme parks, when he found out that this agreement existed, giving us the ability to do STTNG in location-based entertainment, said no effing way. And so the chairman of Edison Brothers and myself had to fly to New York and sit in Stanley Jaffe's office and have him tell us, and I remember it distinctly, you guys have done a great job. We really, enjoyed our partnership, but we just can't do it. We can't honor this agreement. According to the agreement, we have, the rights for 1 year of operation, and then there's a waypoint. So if you want to proceed, you can do it, but just know that at the end of 1 year, it's going to have to be de-identified entirely from STTNG. And that was just going to be prohibitively expensive and a killer to the whole project. So we gave it up. Did the theme parks ever do it? No. Nobody ever did it. Why? Because they wanted to preserve their right to do it. That's one of the sad denouement of the possibilities of interactive simulation in VR.
That was a fantastic run through of that piece of sci-fi history. So thank you, Andy. That's awesome. And I'm sure everybody else in chat or who's watching this later is going to be like, oh, couldn't we have we had it. It would have been awesome. I just imagine going to a Dave & Buster's sized Star Trek themed interactive experience, VR, just, yeah.
Even if we only built one, right? If you only built one and put it in Las Vegas, well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
exactly. Lots of transitory traffic and people coming through. Yeah, it would have been fantastic. In fact, I don't know if someone might have said it in chat already, but it could even be done with, even that much more now. Right? Oh, yeah. People want these interactive experiences. We're seeing so much like holodeck type features that are out. Can you imagine if everyone just had like Apple Vision Pro type headsets and being able to build that world there and interactive along those adventures, right? People like the, Star Wars Galaxy experiences at Disney World or Disneyland. This would be a destination kind of place. Oh, yeah. And in fact, Andy, if we really take off and maybe that NVIDIA stock that you own, you can use that to to be
Yeah,
the seed round for a new implementation. How about that?
that's great. Well, building a Dave and Buster's, is a $10 million effort, and that's just with
Yeah,
video games in it. This would have been probably on the order of 12, $13 million back in the 90s to do it. We
yeah,
were willing to
yeah,
invest that money to do it, but Paramount didn't do it. However, they did license a thing at the Hilton in Las Vegas called the Star Trek attraction or the Star Trek
yeah,
experience, I think, which
yeah,
included one of the things we had delivered in the concept, which was um, a, but they did it on a larger basis with a whole group of people in order to increase the throughput. So instead of the shuttle actually, moving you out into a virtual environment, they did a Pepper's Ghost kind of effect to take you from, an emergency situation into a shuttle and then blast that shuttle into you could see out the window of the front of the shuttle. You could see what was happening, that sort of thing. Um,
yeah.
and but that closed years ago. I don't know what happened to it, but I don't think it exists anymore.
I want it to happen, Andy. Let's
Yeah,
make it happen.
wouldn't it be great?
Um, yeah, I even because like my brain is just going to, it's so much things can be filled in with current AI technologies, what we're seeing coming out. Um, even if this was an implementation that was Disney-esque, right? Because wasn't it about a year ago Disney started talking about their or devised their Imagineering team came up with that 360 movable floor. You could
Yes.
walk in
Yeah,
different directions,
yeah, that was
right?
cool.
So
It was
that's
at
like first stage
CES.
holodeck stuff.
It was
Yeah,
at CES
exactly.
last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so so
So by
there
the
you
way,
got that going on.
that this reminds me that in 1995, when Edison Brothers was going bankrupt, uh, I was offered a position at Imagineering, which is a division of their development organization, so Disney Development. So the fellow who headed Disney Development at the time had seen me speak at some major conferences in the sort of the real estate plus mall development space, the Urban Land Institute meetings, and also at IAPA, where we had introduced the virtuality system at that International Association of Theme Parks and Attractions, International Association, yeah, and IAPA, IAAPA, a big entertainment oriented, annual show. And so they knew about my involvement. And then, of course, whoa, sorry. They also knew about my involvement with Paramount because I told them about it. And so I was offered a position as senior vice president of Imagineering to be responsible for the work that they would do in Orlando and also in other locations if it made economic sense. But there are a number of attractions surrounding the parks that are smaller scale but required substantial sort of technical engineering development in order to implement them in Epcot Center and elsewhere. So I reluctantly didn't take that position because I was just getting divorced and I had a 4 and 8 year old son. I had not a 4 and 8 year old son, but I had 4 and 8 year old sons, two of them, and they were in St. Louis, Missouri. I was also offered a position at Simon Property Group, which was in Indianapolis, which was only 45 minutes by Southwest, away
Hmm.
instead of 5 hours away to Burbank. So I took that position instead. But I often wistfully think about, what would have happened in that alternate universe had I taken the position at Imagineering? What would I have been involved with?
Probably
I'm sure
creating the
Imagineering
Star
is
Wars
actively
version
involved
of
with.
this experience.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Imagineering is now that has an AI component to it, right? They're probably working,
Yeah.
swiftly to deliver AI powered experiences in the theme parks and elsewhere.
Yeah, which is amazing. So, we are a relatively new show. We are going to continue in our interview, but I just want to say if you know someone who should be interviewed, please reach out to us. If you are a current Imagineer. We would love to talk to you about what you're doing with AI.
Yeah.
And we have we have a wish list of our people that we would love to interview, and Will Wheaton is on it. So if you are 1 or 2 degrees separated from Will Wheaton, we would love to follow up with this interview with some of the cast. Okay, so yeah, Junmi, you have something face.
Well, yeah, I was just going to move on to a couple of like burning interview questions that I have for you, Andy. I love that you came onto the show with your Star Trek uniform. So that kind of leads me into the questions of is Star Trek your touch point for science fiction in your life? I mean, obviously with this overall project, but as in science fiction in general. Because I know you've talked about, or we've talked about Max Tegmark and his books mainly because of like their connection to AI. But is Star Trek that touchstone for
No,
you
I would say
in
that
sci-fi?
the earliest connection between my interest in science generally and science fiction comes from my being a reader of science fiction when I was in the college years. That college
Mm.
was a time when I read a lot, right? You had time to read, and I was reading textbooks, of course, but I also read science fiction as my preferred novel form, shall we say. And I wasn't reading romantic novels at the time. I was reading science fiction, and I'll just cite that probably two of my favorite books were, I think, forgive me at my advanced age if I get the name wrong, but Frederick Pohl, Pohl, I think is the author, and
Mm.
one of them is The Black Hole, and that's a pretty um, scientifically accurate depiction of what would happen with a black hole that's kind of traversing the universe
Ah, okay.
and sucking up things. Um, and the but the most memorable of the books that I read back then would be Gateway by the same author, I believe. And Gateway has this incredible idea that this advanced civilization preceded human civilization. And we discover on the moon that there is an operating space station, in effect, with individual space vehicles that we don't understand the technology, but if you align the dials in a certain way and you experiment with that, then you'll be transported to another place, and then you might come back, but you might not. Some people, setting the dials with a certain thing, end up in the middle of a star. We don't know that is what happened to them, but probably. But some people stumble upon other destinations on this sort of navigation system. Include some other outposts of the Hichi civilization, this advanced and now gone civilization, and they come back to Earth with some of the new technology, and then they become fabulously wealthy. So it's like a frontier pioneering ideology where you agree to take the trip, and you have a share of whatever value you bring back if you come back. And I thought that was a very interesting analogy for life itself. We embark on these journeys of life and we don't know what the end result will be ultimately. We make choices like the choice between, going to the mall building developer or going to Imagineering. I don't think I was as challenged intellectually by the mall development space as I would have been if I were, there. And what would have come out of that? What riches, personally and riches economically would have befallen me if I'd taken a different route or just twisted the dial a little differently. And so that was a fascinating concept for me. Also, Stranger in a Strange Land is one that pops to mind as an important one. And the word grok comes from that. So if you haven't read Stranger in a Strange Land, it's an important one because now grok is a major player in the world of AI, and that term grok comes from that novel.
And for a lot of people, it felt I mean, it's not surprising of Elon, but like, hey, we all sort of had an affiliation with that word before it became the name of the model. Although I guess that's happening with all model names. It just felt like, hey, grok was like a great word, like to
Yeah.
use it right. Like, I do you grok that? I mean, it was like it had a depth of meaning. It had a life outside of its AI
I
model.
think the same thing has happened to me with the word patriotic.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Yep, I can see that.
Gotcha.
I can
Gotcha.
totally see that. So,
Okay. Do you have questions you want to follow up, Beth? Because I got one more.
yes. So let's do yours, and then I'll ask the series of questions that we ask all our guests. Andy being the
All right.
first, but still, these are the questions we will ask all our guests.
All right. Andy. So okay. All right. So we talked about sci-fi's touchdown. All right, and I'm still kind of hanging